Welcome. All right, so what do I need to know to be able to solve a quadratic by using the square root method? So in this course, the primary thing we're going to be doing is obviously understanding a quadratic, when we can apply the square root method and when we have to factor or complete the square quadratic formula. But also the most important thing I think with this is understanding our inverse operations. And here's a quick little tutorial that I like to do for all my students. When we went back to lovely Algebra 1, what we did is we talked about inverse operations. Let's do 4x equals 8, and then x over 4 equals 3. Okay? Now, when we're solving an equation, the main important thing that we get into is applying our inverse operation, the opposite operation to undo what's happening to our variable. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just go back through what you learned in Algebra 1. So the opposite operation of adding 4 is subtracting 4. The opposite operation of subtracting 4 is adding 4. The opposite operation of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4. And the opposite operation of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4. Right? So when we get all these, we get all these different answers of x equals 3, x equals 11, x equals 2, and x equals 12. All right? So by using what the square root method really is the same thing, applying those inverse operations, but now looking at an inverse operation of x squared equals 16. So now we look at this and we say, what is happening to the variable? Well, the variable is being squared. So how do we undo the variable being squared? What we do is we take the square root. And what's very, very important that you have to know for this course and moving on is that when you take the square root of both sides, you introduce the square root, that x equals plus or minus the root of your number, which in this case is 4. And why, again, is that the case? Because I could plug in negative 4 squared, and that equals 16. And I could also equal 4 squared, and that equals 16. So all the square root method really is us applying inverse operations. And that's really all you need to know is our inverse operations, and then understanding that the inverse operation of squaring is taking the square root. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's really about the basics we're going to need to know. Thanks. One more thing. The next thing that I forgot to mention also is we can take the square root of positive numbers, but we cannot take the square root of a negative number. Now, depending on what course you're at, because this is, the design courses, for multiple different students, when we're looking at solving a quadratic on the graph, when we look at the square root of a negative number, that's going to be no solution, meaning that the graph is not going to cross the x-axis, which would be our solutions. Our x-intercepts is not going to cross the graph, so we'd say no solutions. However, for some of you that have already been introduced to the complex number system, we represent the negative 1 with as in the number of I. So therefore, again, another example that you may need to know is the square root of negative 9, is going to equal 3i. All right? Or your teacher might also be expecting you just to write in no solutions and don't worry about the i's till later in the course when you get to it. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is everything you need to know for solving using the square root method. Thanks.